Okay, so this is our concluding update from the research that Kathy's been doing for the past year. She's been doing an interview a day up till 11:30 at night, and like a fabulous connection with Kerry Cassidy, and just working her butt off. So we're both a bit exhausted, but we still just want to put some more things on record, and just if there's actually been some great feedback and some great comments and some new, there always is feedback with more intel coming in, which is very rewarding. Just connections and dot joining and people that validate what's been found out. So this is Kathy Morgan. We're talking about the UK, the less evidenced UK until now, MK Ultra, clinical trials, no consent medical research, eugenics, trauma-based mind control, and child abuse. The sort of the nuts and bolts of what was going on pretty much since the end of World War II. And before. We clearly know it was before, but we've concentrated from about after World War II, which is interestingly the same frame that Justice Lowell Goddard of New Zealand is investigating with historical abuse, particularly institutional abuse in the UK, and she made a request that it be backdated to 1945, which I found very interesting. So I'm going to let Kathy talk, because she has got so much information, it's almost overwhelming to try and disseminate, but keep following the work. Subscribe to her YouTube channel. What's your YouTube channel called?
It's Kathy Morgan.
Just Kathy Morgan, CATHI.
MORGAN.
Yeah, and we've put the info, and she will edit in the info for her blog and so on. My name's Angela Power Disney, and my most active forum is Facebook and YouTube. So I've got several groups on Facebook: Mind Control, Social Engineering and Diabolical Medical Experimentation in the UK and beyond. And YouTube channel Angela Power Disney, and there's a smaller one for survivors, Angie Power Disney, and a website which I terribly neglect, angie.gowebs.co.uk.
That's probably not going to be lasting much longer.
Oh gosh.
It runs out in June, and
Oh no, I'll take care of that. Let's not even go there. Do you want to just check that we're recording? Just check that we're all in place.
You should sit in front of the camera for that.
Well, just, yeah.
I think it's much more interesting for people to see two people.
Well, I only want to say hello because this is
yes,
your
it's
work.
recording.
Right, so we're recording. So this is Kathy. We kind of converse more than interview, because we just synchronise with the different areas and the different methods we have of researching. But hats off to Kathy, the black and white evidence, the maps, the connections, the academic papers supporting it. So this is concluding. I'm sure Kathy's going to keep getting interviewed, and I also want to just give a shout out that for anybody that's enjoying, or enjoying is a difficult word, but for anybody that's in a position to support Kathy, even just with the provision of a new laptop, some technology, I don't know what we're talking, 1,000, whatever, 2,000. If anybody's in a position to do that, just to make her work run smoothly, that would be hugely appreciated. She's got a PayPal, she's got a donate on her blog, or I've advised her to set up a GoFundMe. There are no academic fellowships for uncovering corruption and child abuse and eugenics and New World Order agendas. There just are no grants for that on the side of the fence that we're working in. So do, small or large, if anybody can support Kathy's work, it's so valuable, it's so worth it. And thanks.
Thank you, Angie. Okay.
Yeah. You go ahead. Just go ahead and tell us how you are.
Right, yeah. Good. We've put in a lot of time and intense work over the past few weeks, a short space of time, so it feels very good. And I even feel like I'm approaching some sort of closure on this era of my research. So the older stuff, that things are falling into place so well now that I'm looking at moving on to the 70s. I have done a presentation about transhumanism where I touched on my own experiences in the 70s. Excuse me. And a couple of key players in that alternative scene in London and around the festivals, the free festivals, were two chaps I talked about. This was quite an extent, called the two Nicks, and it was Nick. Gosh, I can't remember what the other one was called. It's kind of blank. One of them was Nick Carr-Saunders, and very much involved in that alternative movement. His father has been popping up in my research here about the population studies. He was some sort of mega expert on population studies. He was based at the London School of Economics, and I just realised that I really need to look at what he was doing in more detail because of his son's subsequent role in the scene I was moving around in. I'm very interested. Yeah.
And you've got particular interest in the connections with the food chain and that aspect of things, haven't you?
Oh yeah, that's good. I mean, I'd always had this thing about the food, but I didn't dare even mention it until I started looking at these chemistry papers, chemistry and food, and the movement of the scientists into the food, and getting a pretty good idea that food could be, these substances could be administered on a wide scale. I had to see the science first.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I could even
There's a guy called Kevin Galilei at the moment. He's on a hunger strike in Rome, outside the Vatican, and so on. And he's a genius kind of guy. He speaks several languages, and he's been on hunger strike for almost 40 days now. And he's appealing to the Catholic Church to lift the ban on contraception as a valid way of managing population control, but he's also appealing to the Catholic Church and others to stop the nefarious covert depopulation agenda.
Really?
And he's very educated about the fluoridization and the chemtrails and the food supply and vaccines and so on, and all that field. Really very. He's got some superb research, and I don't know how it's going to end. I think he did a hunger strike before. I don't know. His main field of study, Kevin Galilei, Galilea, I think, and he did a hunger strike before, and he did get some kind of interaction or response from the Vatican, but to me, although it's very noble, and the research he's done exposes the corruption of the food chain and other fields, but to me, the actual thing of saying, well, don't do that, can you just authorise contraception, to me, that's a bit like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's noble that he's exposing it, but I don't think the Catholic Church authorising contraception is going to fix this New World Order agenda. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm not even totally convinced that I don't even know if the whole thing about population control is essential for the survival of the planet and its resources. I'm not even thoroughly convinced that that's true. But anyway, that's just an aside. But no, because I know you've trained in macrobiotic cuisine under a Japanese guy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, well, that does come in. It's quite interesting because when this counterculture movement began in London, there were brothers, the Sams brothers, Greg Sams, and I'm not sure what his brother was called, but they brought macrobiotics to London, Portobello Road series, alternative food place, and Neil's Yard were all part of this. And it did relate to the teachings of George Osawa and Michio Kushi in their research into food, and it really just says basically eat what your ancestors ate for thousands of years and did fine, and they grew it in the back garden.
Yeah,
you know, raised it in the back
which
garden.
is a good thing, because
And
I know.
it's well watered, don't have any additives. It's as simple as that.
And how did you come to train under a Japanese mentor in that field?
I went to paid lectures and classes and counselling at the
Where was this?
Macrobiotic Centre, the East-West Centre in London.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Because Kathy lived with me for 2 months a year ago when she was moving to Ireland, and the food, I noticed a marked improvement in my health. It wasn't just, wacky. I'd come across macrobiotic cuisine when I was working with the EST Foundation headquarters in San Francisco. Werner Erhard, who devastatingly seems to have his name all over this covert stuff as well, sadly. And he had promoted L. Ron Hubbard and science. He said he had sampled every religion and every school of philosophy that there was and drawn the best from all of them, but part of the staff and volunteer recommended reading was L. Ron Hubbard's book, and I never read it. I just had a read it. I don't know why. I didn't want to, and I thank God for that kind of instinct that has kept us alive, really. But in the head office in San Francisco, I don't know if it was called Erhard Seminar Training at that time or the Forum, but the whole cafeteria was macrobiotic. And then when
nice.
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool.
It is, yeah.
And part of me's like, I'm half Irish, so I love a good fry up, eggs and rashes and all that. And I grew up, for some of my life, my father had a steakhouse restaurant, so I can't go the whole vegan. I didn't quite get sucked into the whole new age thing, and I was a bit judgmental. I was a bit programmed in terms of old tree hugging hippies. What are they talking about? Fluoride and chemtrails and all the rest of it. But actually, most of what are firstly called conspiracy theories actually turn out to be true. And it was borne out by the 2 months that Kathy was here and cooked probably 3 or 4 times a week at least. My health, my energy levels, everything just improved phenomenally. So
Yeah.
and the Neil's Yard scene, the Covent Garden scene, I was in that. I went to London at 18 and worked for 3 years before going off to Warwick. And I used to go dancing at the Pineapple Studios. And then we'd always go round to Neil's Yard and have our healthy, vegetarian food. But there's research to be done in that area as well. I think the whole food thing, it's not my field of specialty, but it's definitely, our kids are being poisoned. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The whole processed GMO energy drinks, the whole fast food.
Interesting, because this founder of macrobiotics in the 40s, and perhaps a little bit earlier, George Osawa, he was welcomed with open arms into the avant-garde science strokes free thinking sort of little groups of people that were getting together, such as Norman Cousins and other people at that time. I'd like to read more about that. He was hobnobbing and his ideas were taken on board, and he had identified, he's a very brilliant man in a lot of ways, he'd identified that one world was the way to go in terms of food and sharing knowledge in a very innocent way, and he'd been seemingly embraced by other people, innocent and not so innocent, with the idea of pushing out this agenda of a one world government.
Yeah, and it's I studied before I came into the kind of quote unquote truth movement. I studied eschatology since 1990, quite profoundly. And even back then, it was being said that there's the agenda for the New World Order, the one world religion, the one world, cashless society with a implanted chip and all the rest of it. But it also said there's going to be a counterfeit they're going to harness the New Age movement and actually have them promote the same thing without realising that they were fulfilling the sort of nefarious agenda.
What is eschatology?
Eschatology, sorry, it's study of end times. It's biblically, scripturally based study of end times and interpretation of prophecies and so on. But so I was hearing this kind of thing from people, people like Barry Smith and so on from Australia, just like literally in 1990 and since then, and I've watched it unfold in front of my eyes and it stunned me. But the point I was trying to make was that oftentimes we try and, a bit like possibly, we try and solve a situation that's an agenda, but we're still operating in the same field. So it's almost like they harness, this thing about controlled release of information, and they'll harness what people are doing. I think even in that blog interview you were having last night, there was the question of how much is engineered. Even what we're doing, how much is engineered? How much were we predicted that some of us would survive and release information? Do you know what I'm saying?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
But anyway, can you talk about any interesting feedback you've had since the rash of interviews you've done, or any contacts or any new
Well, on the
developments?
subject of Neil's Yard, I have had a contact with somebody, a very interesting email, also expressing a feeling that something was being done with the food.
Yeah.
In other words, adding.
There was stuff about ecstasy and experiments.
Yeah, so that's an area I will look into. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I was reluctant to come out with the thing about the food, but really I began to think more and more, and I'm quite happy that it's got a good reception, putting that idea out there, and it wasn't totally...
And it is a passion of yours, so it's always good to talk from your passion.
Yeah, and also the sort of chemistry side of it, I had no idea that I was going to have, an interest in that, but when you mentioned fluoride, it's just absolutely fascinating. In terms of the fluoridation apparently going on at the concentration camps, and how that relates to the OP drugs that they were developing, which is the organophosphates, which is the insecticide. And within those drugs, within the insecticides were the actual drugs. So the poisonous gases were the same drugs as the insecticides. So what did they do with the poisonous gases? They sprayed them on our food, and the fluoridation came through that research into those substances. Now, who was really big on that particular area was Wolfgang Wirth, who Henry Dale brought over. He brought him in as a paperclip operation because he certainly wasn't cleared. And in fact, one chap writing about Lyme disease, whose name escapes me just now in a book, identifies that Wirth was accompanied by Mengele. And he said, there was many Mengeles. He is pretty certain, and all indications are that it was the Angel of Death Mengele.
I'm pretty sure that...
So Dale, Barker of sailing with Dale bringing in Wirth hanging around with Mengele.
No, I'm pretty sure that Mengele supervised the RAF Egberg stuff, I'm pretty
but
sure.
All that chemistry stuff does link in with the fluoride, and I'm going to look into that. So I'm starting to be able to actually read these papers and recognise the substances.
Yeah.
And also what comes in there is the consciousness changing aspect of LSD and the way it works on the brain, on the neurotransmitters. They were also looking at how these drugs affected the neurotransmitters in a consciousness changing way, producing hallucinations and so on. So it is a very interesting area that might not on the surface look interesting, insecticides, but then an IG Farben, Dale. In fact,
did you say IG Farber?
Yeah, is it Farben? Yeah.
Okay.
F-A-B-E
N
on the end. Yeah. Was very much part of this. But the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, Dale brought over one of the heads of department, this Mars Vogt. Now Dale was the chap who actually renamed the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute to try and clean up after the war. He renamed it the Max Planck Institute, and it was that's PLANCK, and it was Dale that did the renaming. he brought Vogt over, and she was also working on this substance acetylcholine. But she went on to work majorly in animal research, in this kind of obscure animal research, very interesting department that she took over there and was there for the rest of her life. So other things I wanted to mention was the Catholic aspect.
We'll continue this in a moment. We've just got a little family break. Thank you. How do I do that? Stop thing.
Is there a red button that you?
Is it the top?
The same one as record. Was it,
is it this one at the top or is it that one? This one.
That one.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's
To be continued. Okay.
Where were we?
So yeah, we're picking up after I've had a wonderful adjustment. And I just want to mention that because there's a lot of survivors that network with us. That right. We're sitting in my garden with my spectacular clematis. I just wanted to mention I just had an adjustment on my back, which was phenomenal, with my son's boss, physical therapist, and there's a lot of survivors that network with us that have, these mysterious diseases like ME and fibromyalgia and so on. It's not just the complex PTSD. There's also a very common thread coming through about respiratory issues, even with survivors that never smoked in their lives. Sort of being diagnosed with COPD and so on. And there are some people doing good research in that, but the issue with me, I have multiple issues, but the most significant one is lower back pain, which now in my late 50s can be explained away with, it's osteoarthritis or you've lived a very active life. I was a bit of an adrenaline junkie, so I've had falls off horses and falls doing parachute jumps and I was an adrenaline junkie, zip line jumping and adventure courses, a 6-day course with Werner Erhard and co and so on. But it's not as simple as that, and I remember first noticing that something is, and I'm kind of feeling around in the dark for this, hoping that we'll get some feedback, but I remember noticing that something was actually locked in the lower back, and it was on that 6-day course where, in an ex-Marine camp in the Napa Valley, interestingly quite close to Bohemian Grove, in California, and there was a workshop every day, and it was kind of like boot camp, like running a mile and all sorts of things. It was a very good, there is some great work done under the auspices of this research of human potential, but there was also a lot of nefarious stuff. But one of the workshops was, it's called the anger workshop or something like that, and the back is the seat of anger in some schools of thought, and so we did all our physical stuff, and then we had a workshop where we had to remember an instant in our past where we'd been full of rage and not able to express it, and then we got to beat the crap out of a horse, like the horses you used to jump over in gym, with a baseball bat. Things all very safe and controlled. But every time I went to express historical anger, I collapsed. I just collapsed to my knees with the most excruciating lower back pain that I couldn't. And they kept saying to me, no, press through, you can do it, all that rah-rah American stuff. And I could not break through it. And it's been a constant in my life that lower back pain would, even not medically explained. So, I do have amazing physical therapy now, and I do, have to consciously swim or exercise, walk, whatever. but I think there's more to it than that. So anybody else with any insight on that, and the respiratory thing is just. And I was listening to a very interesting thing about that this morning. Actually, I think it might have been Kathy O'Brien saying that programming for heart failure or respiratory failure was embedded in MK Ultra victims to, as a default if they were likely to access very deeply programmed alters. So that's just interesting. And then the other thing, amongst the much feedback that's come both to Kathy and myself, was somebody had remarked from my Basis series with Basis 43, I talked about my father throwing 3 soldiers around on the beach in Gibraltar like they were dolls. We were stationed there from 61 to 65, I think. And we were on the beach, I think, Eastern Beach, and there were 3 squaddies drunk or something. There's an army and a Navy and an Air Force base on Gibraltar. It's a colony still. And these 3 squaddies were drunk, and they'd stripped down to their underwear, and they were cursing and just being drunk on the beach. And my dad said to them something like, "Behave yourselves, there's women and children here," and they gave him some mouth. And he switched, and he just tossed them around. He just tossed them around like rag dolls. And it was very shocking. It was, and I remember that, there's been a few incidents in my childhood where I've seen that in my father. Another time, Lawrence Cookie, as we called him in my childhood, in Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire. He's dead now, God love him. But he got drunk at my 16th birthday party. And my father just picked him up, and literally it was like a cartoon. Picked him up, just threw him out of my party. And another time with Pete Dowdle, who was 6 foot something, and my dad's only about 5, 9, 10. And again, my dad knocked him like spark out. So, and the other thing that ties in with that, and that makes me. The person that wrote it on a forum said, what was it, John Irwin, that he compared. I must look up that training. I know, I don't think any of us survivors like the super add-on, like super soldier, super spy, whatever, because it glamorises something that was horrendous. It's not glamorous at all. But the other thing that makes me suspect that was that technically my father was in the catering corps of the Royal Air Force, which he was manoeuvred into. He first of all wanted to be a pilot, and I think he had an issue with hearing. So then he was in aircraft engineering, and then he was persuaded to transition to the catering corps, and I believe that was for ease of mobility if he was recruited into programs that were going on that were either orchestrated or approved of by the military. But but the thing that was strange was that he used to come home from work, and he used to excitedly tell us these kind of SAS type assassination techniques that he was learning at work. For instance, he would say, that a blow to the left temple will render somebody unconscious. He used to say that if you fill somebody's lungs with water and then kneel on them, they will drown and there'll be no evidence. He used to play this silly game of, Chinese torture things that he used to do that would make, and we had to say, "I surrender," and we just collapsed to our knees. He put pressure in certain places. And then in darker situations, he used to say to my mother, "I know a dozen different ways to hurt you and never leave a mark." I can probably recall more incidents than that, but it's only with hindsight that you think if somebody's in the Air Force in the catering corps, why are they coming home all excited about these techniques for SAS type operations? And then in my sister's inquest, it was confirmed, and I have this on, I have this recorded. It's confirmed that she had a hematoma on the left temple. It hadn't fractured her skull, but it had caused an internal hematoma. That was written off as she must have fallen, but I don't know anybody, I don't know anybody who falls on their left temple. There was also half of a hot water bottle contents missing, and there was no alcohol in her blood, and there was a count of a toxin similar to antifreeze, off the charts level, 500 plus, but the inquest dismissed the zero alcohol, dismissed the toxin, dismissed the hematoma, didn't even investigate the possibility of excess fluid in the lungs, and just wrote it off as a alcohol-related death, which has broken my heart. But they've advised me that I'll have to go through the process to get a judicial review if I'm not happy with their inquest results. So we'll see if I do that. It's very hard. There's so many fronts to fight on, and the best I can do is fight it with information and fight it with communication, networking. That's my forte. Catherine's forte is research and evidence, academia. We can all only do our bit, but I would appeal not just for support, practical support, things like I said, to get Kathy a laptop and upgrade her tech, but support, legal support. We really need some. If we're going to really nail this down, we need a legal team that will work on a sort of not totally voluntary basis, but obviously most survivors are miracles to be alive. Most have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Many wrestle with addictions. The fallout to the experiments and the MK Ultra and the trauma-based mind control, and the alienation through experiments that were carried out just to examine the human mind as if it was dissecting a rat in a laboratory or something. The fallout is just horrendous. So I'm doing what I can, Kathy's doing what she can, but I think we're both aware that this is not a one-man band operation. This is some people have been working for decades in this field, and some of us have come to it later, but it's definitely going to take networking. So keep the emails coming, keep the comments coming, keep the networking going, keep supporting anybody that's on the front line, or because it is dangerous. You can email me. Should we give out email addresses, do you think? Or
sure.
Yeah, my email address, angelapowerDisney@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook and private message me. And what's your email address?
Kath Morgan, CATHMORGAN, at MSN.
Kath Morgan
.com.
at
Yeah.
MSN.com, but Kath's doing some great editing. That's the other thing. I mean, Kath's taught herself to do editing. I haven't, and it helps enormously. So that's another area where, you may not be, if there's some geeks out there, I mean that in a good way, if there's some geeks out there that can even give survivors tech support just to edit, and any way we need to work together on this, is the point I'm making. And I'm just ongoingly grateful for the work, the research that's being done. I'm going to hand back over to Kath. She's heading back to see her daughter tomorrow, and she's done a marathon in terms of interviews and so on. So I'm just going to make sure that we haven't missed anything that we would, we can Skype interview again, but it's been absolutely fabulous to be together. We can wake up and talk to each other from the bedroom, through the bedroom walls, and we should have recorded that, and I think as well, we're both guilty. I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I avoid the actual pain stuff, the actual stuff when you can't move for the agony, and not just physical agony, but the you know, the pain of family rejection and isolation, the pain of, you know, the cost that there has been, and I'm going to actually spend some time myself documenting, even if it's just to a video camera myself. I'm going to spend some time documenting more of the hard stuff, you know, the stuff we don't want to say, because it's so easy to get distracted and want to. In fact, if you've been mind controlled, you don't just get distracted, you dissociate. And I was even saying that in the past week, well, the past year, I've been under severe attack for working on the Hampstead case, and sometimes when the attacks are too brutal, I get angry, and then I dissociate and file it. And it's only if somebody says to me, "Do you know what they're doing? Have you taken any legal action?" So I have to actually pull back in the experience of that pain, because I still have a default to just dissociate and move on, dissociate and move on. So, you know, it's a journey. The healing is still a journey as well. But we're growing, aren't we? We're better than we were a year ago. And I think I just need to say as well that for me, the biggest survival tool has been my faith. You know, I know in the truth movement there's a huge, you know, oh, this is a conspiracy theory and that's conspiracy theory, and you know, I kind of tread. I do a lot of work amongst people in the truth movement, which can also spill over to the New Age movement, which can also spill off over to cosmic consciousness stuff. And but for me, I just wouldn't feel authentic having done this series with Kathy without just saying, for me it's Jesus, you know, an experience, not the Catholic version, not religion, not brutality, not mind control, mass population control, just a relationship with my Creator and Jesus. So I'm going to hand back over to Kathy and get academic again. God bless. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe, share, get this information out, and get in touch. We really appreciate you watching. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah, so interesting that one aspect of this does, like you say, not the Catholic version, because Catholic really featured majorly when we were in Bath as children, and I haven't mentioned much about that yet.
I might just move this a bit closer, because unless you can speak a bit louder, because we haven't got fancy microphones and things like that. Okay. So I just want to make sure the volume's high enough. Okay, although the clematis is spectacular.
I know.
There we go. There we are. Right, carry on.
Yeah. So the Catholic, we were Catholic, and went to Catholic schools, and a fellow survivor from just very close to Swainswick has been in touch, and she was in some sort of program with Catholic nuns. So I think the Catholic aspect is related to the movement of children and the identification of children in these programs, and that is something that I came across first of all in Fritz Springmeyer's work.
Yeah. About
the Jesuits and the Catholics, and I know for personally the school I went to, the primary school in Bath.
What was that called? I've never asked you.
It was St. John's, which is St. John the Evangelist, and they had a head of school. The head nun was called Sister Ignatius Loyola, so I guess they were Jesuit based. And of course, they were related to the convent where you were.
La Santa Union. Yeah, that was the feeding. Yeah.
Our church.
Yeah.
Our school was adjoined to the church.
We had the same uniforms, the boaters, the white gloves. Yeah.
And that would be your church that you would have gone to from the convent.
But although we went to St Patrick's Catholic Primary School in Corsham.
Yes.
Which was where the military children were fed into.
Right. Interesting.
But no, it's right. So, okay.
Just going back briefly to where I was talking about the OP drugs, the HT5 mood altering drugs that I'm getting a little bit of a interest in. And I did notice that a related drug called muscarines was being researched by Dr. Joel Elks at Porton Down, and he was the chap that was working both in Washington on MK Ultra, and also came back to England and opened an LSD clinic at Birmingham University. His tutor was actually Lord Moran. So Lady Moran, who my grandma mentioned, was working at Porton on the poisonous gases. Lord Moran was Elks' tutor. And strangely enough, Lord Moran was also a good friend of the chap William Goodenough, who was chairman of Barclays Bank, who'd arranged the funding. We're looking around the 30s, 40s here now. The funding for the Tower of the Winds. Barclays. So Barclays is interesting in the other sense that it's a family bloodline situation where you have the Barclays, the Huxleys, the Galtons, the Wedgwoods, and who else intermarrying with each other? The Darwins, yeah.
Wow.
And the Huxleys do feature very, very majorly in this research too. Yeah, let me see now. There's Julian Huxley, who was in Tots and Quats. But we've also got Andrew Huxley, who's a sibling. He's actually a half-sibling. But he was working with Dale at the Plymouth Marine Research Laboratories on the neurotransmitters. They used the giant squids so they could see the nerves very clearly. And he was there with Dale, as I say, and Dale was on the panel with Julian Huxley, working with Andrew Huxley, and there's a chap called Lindemann there on this first Tots and Quats panel, and he's interesting. German Jew, I think. He became Churchill's major advisor in the war, in World War II. He was his closest advisor. And he came to my attention because I'd noticed that British Oxygen Company was sponsoring the Bath Institute of Medical Engineering. So I'd gone digging, looking at British Oxygen, and come up with Lindemann because they'd sponsored him. He'd worked under their funding at one point, and then I see he links to many of these other people here. Bears a good bit more looking at. I think he may relate to the paperclip situation, actually. Anyway, we'll see about that. Another chap on the Tots and Quats, Lawrence Hogben, was Julian Huxley's fag at Eton. And as you know, Barcroft was at the same school.
Marlborough, Eton and Oxford, Cambridge and Oxford were... But there are much more. Gordonstown, like there's so many more.
It's
the Royal
true.
Victoria military boarding school in Scotland. It's not. I think Bath was a nucleus for sure, and you talked about the hot springs, and I've also done a little bit of research, but it was going on in Scotland. It was going on,
yes.
And it's not
it's
even
only
UK
that
wide.
I've managed to identify this around my situation. I'm not saying this is the only thing.
No, but I do think Bath was an HQ for a lot of what was going on.
Being the Admiralty, it seems to have become the RAF.
Yeah, Rudley Manor, the Corsham.
I have found the RAF were sponsoring a major chimpanzee study too.
That's
Independent of America, who they also...
And the underground base was designed for the royal family and the establishment, MPs and so on, that if in the event of a catastrophe in London, that was where they would be transported to, and there were underground means of them to go the whole way. There were, these underground bases were linked up.
Yeah,
you could drive 60 miles underground.
Yeah.
And Prince Philip was a regular visitor.
That's right.
You talked about that as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to take you off topic. Keep going, because you're doing brilliantly.
British Oxygen... I had a feeling about, so I dug a bit more and found that they would actually be in a position to enter the homes of people giving birth in 1931 when my mum was born. They were putting the finishing touches, or perhaps had already started a scheme to bring gas and oxygen into homes, into home births, because these were instrumental in the medicalisation of birth, and to gain control of the births. As I said, Nuffield was big on instructing the midwives. British Oxygen was working with the Birthday Trust Fund, who were arranging for the analgesic for the birth in the homes. Of course, the Birthday Trust Fund were the people that funded my NCDS.
Sarah Michelle Goodley has done some amazing research on birth trauma. Yeah, was she a midwife?
Her sister.
She's done some good, because it was definitely, even in utero trauma was part of this.
Yeah. Other bits and bobs. Let's see, in terms of the Rothschild, and I talked about H.S. Rothschild, and I identified him as being a wealthy older man. He was married to Alison Ames. Mm-hmm. So it's come to my attention that H.S. Rothschild was travelling on the White Star Line in 1919 to New York, but he was accompanied by a Louis Rothschild, who I've identified has close links.
Spike, stop it.
Who's got close links with a Nazi situation and with Nazis, and there was controversy. So I need to look closer into that, because, trying to trace this Nazi links into this British situation, I think is important. It's a good road to go down there, so that's another thing I'm going to be doing. Erhard and Ron Hubbard. Yeah, I've just put a note there to just
Erhard,
to say that.
Jack Rosenberg, he changed his name to Werner Erhard. And at the Council of Nine channeling, I'm very interested in that.
Yeah.
And also, he studied under a Satanist in California who had studied under Aleister Crowley.
Oh, right. Do you know the name?
I'll get it for you. I've got it saved.
Okay. Well, Ella and Hubbard and Scientology, there's a blog that research it in such a depth. Oh, God. It's the McClary.
Look what you started.
It's the McClary blog. It's Virginia McClary. I think you spell that MC LAUGHRY McClary. I'm sorry, I'm not
it's okay.
sure.
It's okay, because we can edit it.
But I would really recommend. Her research is phenomenal.
Yeah,
she's really excellent. The people that I spoke to last night, the website, I'll just give a shout out for Jason and his interesting.
Tell me that
research.
blog, because that was fascinating. That interview. Tell me.
He's got a blog called The Autist, AUTIST.
Oh, interesting.
And he has a podcast page called The Liminalist, LIMINALIST, and he's done some amazing work and research, which he does in a completely different way.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend checking.
Yeah, we've got to go outside the box.
He's an author and somewhat an artist, really.
Yeah, it was an amazing interview. Amazing.
Yeah. So that's where my notes are. Oh, I have another little note here. I must remember to tell y'all about an extraordinary newspaper story I came across, several newspaper stories regarding the blackmail of Lord Nuffield, and I must get the full details of this, but I did want to remember to say the chap was found with a gun in his pocket, apparently on his way to Lord Nuffield's house. He was a very wealthy guy, very, very wealthy. He had several mansions and in various places, countries, but he'd been writing letters to Lord Nuffield saying he knew about the harem and the girls in India, and there's a big blackmail story there, which I think is worth pursuing. So I'm gonna dig out that in terms of forthcoming material.
Well, I just want to thank you and thank. I do hit despair. I don't know about you, but I do hit despair and think, what's the point? I do also think, look how it's all exposed in America, and yet, it's possible that Hillary Clinton could be the president pretty soon, despite disclosures that were not contested and were proven. And so I'm sure, like most survivors, we hit despair, and yet I think something as simple as yet another survivor contacting us, or somebody else saying here's this evidence, or a working police surgeon saying you're on the right track, keep going, don't quit. You know, I think that's what, I don't know about you, but that's what keeps me going.
Definitely.
So just want to thank you so much for what you're doing, and keep doing it, and you know, we don't want to dwell on the darkness.
I just like to say also that sometimes I do read every email, but sometimes I'm overwhelmed with other things and I cannot address it and right away. Or sometimes I'm actually triggered by the material that people are actually writing to me about. And
I do. I can
and have to turn away and so it's not, you know, it is not that anything. You know,
it's nothing personal. It's not rejection, because you can have survivors and they're so vulnerable that if they reach out and disclose to us, and there's not an instant acknowledgement, it's like, well, F you, you know, like, I've just poured my heart out and you haven't replied.
I've been there myself.
Yeah, you know, and it's not that at all. It's just, you know, I can collapse for 6 weeks and just hardly be able to move.
Yeah, it's a regular occurrence.
This is
to withdraw for 6 weeks without having any control over that. You know,
we're just sharing from personal experience. This is not an academic exercise. So thank you so much. God bless, and forgive our semi-amateur, we're getting better, but forgive our semi-amateur presentations, and feel free to come on board and give us some editing help. Thank you, God bless.